Greetings, friends. John Borgen coming to you from one of the four major basilicas of Rome, Saint Mary Major. In just a few minutes, we'll be having a Mass with Archbishop Grab. But before we do that, I am so delighted to introduce all of you to an old friend of mine from St. John's University. His name is Eric LeCompte, and he's the Executive Director of Jubilee USA Network. And what a better person. I'm so grateful to have been able to run into him, but what a better person to tell us about the Jubilee Year and what it means from both a historical, a theological, spiritual, as well as a social perspective. So without any further ado, and introduce you to my friend Eric. Greetings, Eric.
John, it's a real gift to be with you today here at St. Mary's, where Pope Francis rests, and to be able to join Archbishop Grab and the community here as he celebrates Mass this morning.
Yeah, indeed. So, Eric, this Jubilee Year, it's a big deal. Rome is packed, pilgrims everywhere, and we're about halfway through. What can you tell, our members and followers about what exactly is a Jubilee Year?
Well, a Jubilee Year is a holy year. It's a sacred year that the Church celebrates every 25 years. There are a few other special years that are sometimes in between, but the main official years are every 25. So the last official year was Jubilee 2000, and now we're in Jubilee 2025. The Jubilee Year is very connected to these sacred Jubilee doors we walk through, because when we walk through these doors, our sins, our debts are forgiven, and as our debts are forgiven, as we know from the Lord's Prayer, then we are called to forgive the debts and sins of others. And that is something that integral, that comes from both the Hebrew and the Christian scriptures. It's one of the most powerful themes of the Bible that actually begins in the law books of the Bible, that every 7 years debts are to be forgiven. Every 7 years slaves are to be set free. Every 7 years the land is to rest and go fallow so God can provide directly for us. And every 7 times 7 years, the 50th year, is the great year of Jubilee, the great time of restoration, when we forgive debts of others and God forgives our debts. Now, socially, that's connected to a very important theme. The Church looks at this in a very real way, and it was John Paul II, St. John Paul II, in 1998 at World Youth Day, who said the focus of the Jubilee Year, beyond our own need for forgiveness, is to work on debt relief for around the world. So out of John Paul II's call, my organization, Jubilee USA, part of the global Jubilee movement, began. And as we began, we worked with John Paul II and later Pope Benedict, and won relief for $130 billion of countries, the poorest developing countries in the world, that were suffering because their debts were so high. They were spending more on debt than they were on education, anti-poverty, health, and all social services combined. So what this meant, John, is that we were able to win $130 billion in debt relief, and now there are 52 million kids who are going to school in sub-Saharan Africa who never would have seen the inside of a classroom. And 1 year ago, we were here with Pope Francis, where Pope Francis in June of last year, God rest his soul, declared the focus again of the Jubilee Year in the spirit of John Paul II to be the relief of debt of the world's poorest countries, so that we may be able to end poverty and we may be able to provide the desperate social services that the majority of the people of the world need, who are living in dire poverty.
So, Eric, the theme of this Jubilee is Pilgrims of Hope. And, boy, it sure seems right now everybody's looking for, deeply desiring, clinging to, wanting glimmers of hope, because it seems headlines and our own lived experiences, at times you wonder, right? That's when I guess our human frailty comes through. But I'm curious, you referenced the 138, congratulations on that. Where are some other, glimmers of hope? And what keeps you hopeful as you continue to do your important work here this year and in the years to come?
Well, I think what's very exciting is that as people of faith, as Catholics, we've been very successful in this campaign that John Paul II first called for as a focus of the Jubilee Year. So we're very hopeful. A part of what we're doing with the Catholic Church, this is also one of the largest interfaith, interreligious convenings that the Catholic Church is a part of and working for debt relief. Something that gives me a lot of hope is our faith leaders go with us directly to where the world leaders are meeting, the G7, the G20, the United Nations, to call to enact not only debt relief, but what Pope Francis called for a year ago, and also what Pope Francis called for in his historic speech to the United Nations in 2015, but actual changes to the financial system in the spirit of Jubilee so that we can constantly, continually eradicate poverty. We can actually build that world where we all have enough. And I think one of the very exciting things about this religious movement that comes from the very, very heart of the church and the very heart of our tradition is throughout our history, we have the support of both Republicans and Democrats. Every Republican and Democratic president in the United States has supported our effort. All of them thought it was absolutely critical to extend these policies, because these policies of debt relief are also the most transparent and accountable when we're able to relieve the debt of developing countries. It has a direct impact on our food and fuel prices. It has a direct impact on our ability to sell our goods abroad, as well as inflation here in the United States. So it's continued to be a very popular cause. We have a lot of work to do. There are a lot of changes that need to be made in the financial system. But of course, as we are here where Pope Francis rests, I think what gives me the greatest hope is that he really laid out a vision for the changes we need in the financial system. And now we know the Holy Father, Pope Leo, is continuing the lead of Pope Francis.
That's fantastic, Eric. I guess as a final thought, you referenced Pope Francis a couple of times, and in fact, I'm just going to pan over your shoulder here, and we can see pilgrims who are, offering prayers for the repose of his soul and all of the good work that he did. I'm just curious, Eric, you had the pleasure of meeting him several times, of getting to know him, and so I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you for a reflection on what you think his legacy is to the church and the world.
Well, I think his legacy is quite profound, and I came here to St. Mary's earlier in the week to have a visit with Pope Francis and to thank him for all he continues to do and for becoming a patron of our Jubilee movement, like John Paul II and His Holiness Pope Benedict. I think one of the most powerful things that's part of the legacy of Pope Francis is that Pope Francis very much believed that we have to confront the greatest challenges of the world with joy. And knowing right now that the majority of the world's countries are in economic, financial crisis, that food and fuel prices have skyrocketed, meaning that according to the World Bank, we see the largest numbers of people living in extreme poverty, 800 million. But what Pope Francis continued to do was to confront challenges with joy, to confront challenges with laughter. And I think what I'll remember most about him, beyond the great legacy he had on prayer issues, on social issues, but was his laugh and his laughter. There was never a time when I was with him over the last 10 years when Pope Francis wasn't making a joke, wasn't laughing, wasn't reminding us to love life and love one another in the midst of this suffering and challenge. And in fact, when I last saw him around Christmas, he had a little nickname for me. He used to call me Jubileo, which means Jubilee in Spanish, and he would say it and he would laugh and laugh and laugh. He thought it was the funniest thing, and you could not help but laugh with Pope Francis. Quick wit, wry sense of humor, but ultimately it was about reminding us to confront the world with love, joy, and laughter, because that's absolutely critical to living a holy life.
Wow. Well, Eric, thanks so much for taking time to share this message with all of our members. And if they would like to learn more about, what it is that you do, how can they find out more information?
Well, please go to our website, jubileeusa.org. When you go to jubileeusa.org, you'll find prayer resources, you'll find action resources, and you'll find out how you and your community and your parish can learn about the Jubilee Promise as laid out in the traditions of the Catholic Church and other faith traditions, and how you can take action to move forward these vital campaigns of debt relief and economic aid so we can all build a world where we have enough.
That's fantastic, Eric. I'd be remiss if I didn't end this video with a shout out to the place that formed both of us in a very big way, Collegeville, St. John's University in Collegeville, Minnesota, and our Benedictine brothers, mentors. They had such a big impact on our lives, and it's so good to be with you here in the Eternal City.
Good to see you, John.
Thanks
for
Eric.
having me here.
God bless.